not right. It's not right. Oh, no. Everyone, take cover!
Yes, it's an exciting scene, isn't it? And you can really see the editing. But it's always action scenes that get all the attention. But dialogue scenes, for example, are not only as important, they're actually harder to put together. Modestly, the editor responsible for this work on the TV miniseries Occupation neglected to mention that she was BAFTA nominated for it. Most people have never heard of Victoria Boydell. She's responsible for some of the most stunning British film and television produced over the last 30 years. But they will have seen her at work on Luther or Great Expectations, Belle or The Second Best Marigold Hotel, Spooks or London Spy or Goodbye Christopher Robin, or Broken. Let's meet Vic Boydell and find out what she's like. Here's what film director John Madden thinks.
As you know, she's an immensely engaging, not to say hugely intelligent and energetic presence. I instinctively have great respect for the way she reads emotional nuance. It's the characters that are, that's where the film resides for me always. And so the nuance of performance is absolutely critical. I would always give Vic, or indeed any editor, but particularly her, the first choice over that. I think it does have to do with a woman's way of looking at the world as well. I mean, it's just empathy, is so much what a film is about, what editing a film is about.
One of Vic's own favourites is the 2012 drama Broken, based on Daniel Clay's novel and written by Mark O'Rowe. Broken is about a young girl called Skunk who's forced to grow up too quickly, and it's also a love story between a daughter and her single-parent father. It's about neighbours and how they impact on those around them, about the different forms love takes, and how people and societies become broken. It was the winner of the Best British Independent Film Awards and of several international film festival prizes.
The film probably that's closest to my heart maybe is Broken. That's probably been my happiest experience. I really loved that film. And my agent sent me the script for Broken. I didn't really have time to cut it because I was just finishing Great Expectations. And in a matter of a few months, I was about to start on a film. But I read the script on a train with the family. I think I moved to a different sort of section of the train, sat quietly, and was gripped from the first page. And I just put the script down and said, "Oh, bugger, I just can't not cut it." But I actually didn't really have enough time. So we found a way where during the shoot, I think the first couple of weeks of the shoot, I just watched rushes in the evening while I was finishing fine cutting the project I was on. Rufus Norris was a big theatre director, quite established at the National Theatre.
I hadn't worked with Vic before we made Broken, but then I hadn't worked with any editor because it was my first feature. So it was a little bit of a baptism of fire for me. Vic came heftily recommended, and when I met her, I got on with her immediately and felt instinctively that this was somebody who I could work with and who would be very proactive and collaborative, and that's exactly as I like it, and obviously what I needed. And it was immediately a very, very fluid and collaborative relationship. It's hard to sum up a complex relationship in a few words, but I'm going to have a go. Vic is fantastically dynamic, and she's got that brilliant combination of energy and dynamism, speed, which is great in an editor. She's got a huge amount of intuition, but she's also got terrific emotional depth, and for me that was really, really important with this story. We wanted it to be swift and punchy and and great fun, full of wit and humour, and she's got a terrific sense of humour.
He's so creative and collaborative. Just the way he talked about the script and the characters, coming from his theatrical background, is just so different. It was just a breath of fresh air for me.
So Vic as one would expect, fed back as we were shooting, just making comments on coverage and working closely with myself and the DOP.
I think it's a combination of Rufus planning to shoot with his DP, switching the camera on and off. So it was definitely deliberate on their part. But also, I personally absolutely love film fogging. When you switch the camera off, you get a few frames of whiteout, usually with a tiny bit of speeding up. So I guess that's partly why we went to town with it on Broken. And it felt intrinsic to the story, and Skunk and her memory. So when those sections where they shot the family flying paper planes and larking around and stuff, again, they switched the camera on and off, so it was sort of intentional. We just maybe went to town on it a little bit more. If you've already primed somebody with an idea you're going to try, it's very hard to know if it works, and often I find directors reject it intellectually without just watching it instinctively. So for me, the assembly is my golden chance to show a director scenes and sequences that they might not have imagined in that way. And they might hate it, or they might embrace it and say, gosh, I hadn't thought it would ever work like that, but it kind of punches me, in the solar plexus.
She's got a fantastic I'm bored face, which I grew to recognise very, very quickly. We'd do a sequence, or she'd show me a sequence, and she'd just have that look about her which said, I think we could do a bit better than this, or I think that's a slightly old-fashioned idea, or whatever it was. And then I'd go, bit boring, and she'd go, a bit boring. Here's one I prepared earlier, and actually here's three that I prepared earlier, and she'd show me and educate me, really. I mean, it was like a crash course in how to remake a film through the edit process.
What would you do if I died, Dad?
I can't even answer that question.
Would you cry?
Huh?
A lot.
I don't think I'd ever stop.
What if I... Stop!
No.
It's allowed! Tell me about the night I was born.
What we discovered during the editing process was that we didn't have to stick to the linear nature of the way the script had been written and the way that we'd shot it. And obviously, I was all up for playing around with this and seeing if there are flashbacks written into the story. But she really took that mechanism and applied it in other places and really surprised me. So there were fantastic revelatory moments for me when she would say, yeah, it's okay, but actually, if we tried this, using the same language in a different part of the film, what does that do? And it completely opened it up and gave it a whole kind of internal logic and energy, which really suited the way that it was shot.
One of Vic's distinctive editorial flourishes is the use of the flash forward to take us into the next scene.
Asshole. I mean, why the hell are you with
This shot is from the next scene coming up.
Fucking coward. Asshole.
So's the audio we've just heard. And then the final bit of displaced audio takes us into the next scene.
And the things he said to me, you know what he called me?
What?
Obsessive fucking bitch. Fuck you.
I started doing it on Great Expectations, and I just did it in a few places, but I found it so effective for throwing the audience forward into the next scene, but without quite letting go of the previous scene, that I think I was just on a bit of a roll with it when I came to do Broken. I don't know. I guess every editor has their own sort of odd little motifs. Like I love displacing, I think on pretty much everything I've cut until recently. Yeah, I like displacing dialogue mapped onto people not speaking. So just sort of overlaying so that some of their words are in their mouth and some of their words are thoughts.
Will you do one thing for me? Will you just apologise to Skunk for me?
We spoke to her friends. We spoke to all of her friends.
For all the embarrassing shit that she's had to witness.
No, so my daughter
Okay, Mike.
has type 1 diabetes. Do you understand?
In the case of Roy Kinnear, I think actually Rufus and I stumbled across that together. So we actually pared it down a lot. But the one thing we preserved was the section of displacing Rory's screams. We just watched it. We watched it mute, and it really upset us. And then I can't remember, one of us must have suggested, let's try and slide the screams onto other people and just feel the effect. And it upset us so much, we just kept it like that. Sometimes that kind of sound design work I'll do in the assembly. I'll come across it in the assembly and I'll try things out, because I figure if I can't show the director my intention, often you never get a chance to.
Sequences in particular, there's probably no better example than the opening sequence, where we gathered a lot of material. We weren't quite sure what we were going to do. It's very much one that was going to be made in the cutting room.
Well, I think the script and the way he shot it suggested a kind of montage of floating sort of breaths, fragments of memory, and the baby in the hospital. But it was all up for grabs, and actually we did refine it a few times, partly because we changed the ending quite late on, which meant that we then injected some of Skunk dying.
And really that's her work at its best, setting up an attachment for the audience, a deep attachment to that central character before she's even uttered a word, and using music, which is the Eloise, the girl playing Skunk, the main character, using her own vocals on the song, just to tie that all together. And it just felt like the most fluid, complex, and accessible way into this, into the love affair with this young person. Her insight, her use of music, her use of temp music actually was really problematic, because she sewed it together so beautifully that it then became a really, really difficult job to try and replace what she'd come up with.
Now I know so many things go big and I got wings to carry me back home to my house that's made of bricks, but that's just such a fix to ever hold me down. What is what I was to start, broken by my open heart.
Sadly, he was, I think the whole time we were fine cutting, he was really tied up with a theatre play that he was doing. And so I was a little bit like the mistress that couldn't quite get enough of so he was sort of on his day job, and then he'd sort of run across into town and spend a couple of hours with me, you know, every other day or something. But it just was kind of never quite enough.
One thing that's very important for me in any process is to have a sense of humour, particularly when you're dealing with a story that has great lightness but also darkness within it.
Can I get a new phone?
You've got a phone?
It broke. Can I get a new one?
No.
Why not?
Well, you should have taken better care of the old one.
It'd make me so happy.
Quiet, Skunk.
I'd just be the happiest child.
I'm trying to work, love.
I'd be delirious. It's just not fair.
I don't care.
Don't care about me. Yeah, he doesn't care about me.
And obviously the hours in the edit suite can be can be long and convoluted. So it was really fantastic, alongside the brilliant work she was doing, to find out had a kindred spirit in terms of our sort of shared humanity and humour within that.
Do you understand me?
Do you understand me?
There's a whole sprinkling of twinkle across the film, the wit of the film, which is absolutely Vic's doing. She'd just pull moments that didn't exist in the script, or I didn't even know we had it. She'd juxtapose images or cut dynamically in a way that just brought the humour and joy of it to the fore. And of course, because there was this terrific pace and energy, it meant that her use of silence, or the juxtaposition, the shocks, the many rites of passage, moments where our lead character comes up against life, were held up in really stark contrast to the energy of the film in other parts.
And then I cut the film, and sadly I couldn't see it through the post with the mix or anything, because I was then sort of late to start my next film. But I'm so glad I cut it. It was absolutely the right decision. Rufus was a joy to work with.
But let's rewind a moment. How did Vic get into this business in the first place? Her ambition to work in fine arts was hampered by a slightly checkered beginning to her further education. Vic claims she's one of the few people to have failed her art foundation course.
I went to a photography and film course at the place that was called the Polytechnic of Central London, now called University of Westminster. Every time we did a film project, I just loved it. The collaborative nature of film. We would be in groups of 4 or something. 2 people would write, 1 or 2 people would write. I managed to light and shoot all the films, and I managed to cut all the films we made in 3 years. And I just loved every minute of it. And I came out thinking I'll either be a cinematographer or an editor, because those were my 2 passions. And I went to South America for 3 months and came back, and the next day, I think I got a phone call from the head of the course saying there was a British film in Soho at Delaney needing a trainee. And he didn't recommend I did it. He said, it's terrible, no money, sandwich money. I think it's exploitation. I don't think you should do it. And I thought, that sounds perfect for me. I'm going to go work really hard for no money on a proper film. And I suppose I never really made the decision about cinematography. If you work in the right cutting rooms, in those days, I think it's maybe slightly different now because everyone has their doors shut. But in those days, I sat on a rubber numbering machine in the corridor, which meant everyone walked past me all the time. And the moment that first film finished, someone else said, "Oh, are you available? We need a trainee on our film." And yeah, within a year or 2, I was a second assistant editor. Things took longer then. So you would be a career assistant. Some people would be a career assistant, and other people, the sort of pyramid shape of film editing, I suppose, meant you'd probably serve a couple of years as a trainee, maybe 5 years as a second assistant, maybe 5 or 10 years as a first assistant. Some people stayed as a first assistant. But generally, you moved steadily up. So you would hope within about 15 years, I guess, to cut a film. I was super ambitious, and I tried to leapfrog quite quickly. I think I tried to cut my first film after about 7 years. But I was seen as a bit of a jumped up upstart. Whereas now you meet assistants who, after 18 months, are champing at the bit saying, "Can you give me some scenes to cut? Can I cut that? Can I cut that? Will you recommend me as an editor?" Because the job has changed. I guess it's not the same craft as it was. And I think the mindset is probably such that people feel if they know all the tools, if they know how to work the Avid, they know all the buttons to press, they know how to do everything, they just want to get going. Whereas the mentality then was more, I'm sitting in the back of the room filing trims for 4 months, watching Terry Gilliam and Mick Audsley craft the film and listening to Terry's amazing stories, hilarious stories, and watching how they shape up a scene, going to every screening, going back into the cutting room with them, just sitting quietly at the back. That to me was invaluable. It wasn't about, do you know how to splice? The splicing, the physical bit took minutes. but it was just absorbing how films are made. And I genuinely would sit there thinking, that scene's perfect. Why are you changing it? I don't understand why you're analysing it and overanalyzing it, changing it. And then 3 hours later, we'd watch back the scene and I think, oh yes, I think I understand maybe what you've done, but what you've brought out of the tension or the characters. And I'm so glad I spent those months and years sitting in rooms listening to directors and editors shape the film.
Let's see what Mick says about working with Vic.
Vic, bless her, came on as I call trainee. That sounds demeaning, but do you know what I mean? It's like an assistant working for the other assistants, let's put it that way. So either a second assistant editor, let's say she came as a second or third assistant editor on Vampire. And it was very clear right from the beginning that here was a filmmaking mind with a supreme intelligence and an ability to navigate her way through what must have been at that time, being in that particular hierarchy of respectful, because, she was junior to us in the room, but also having a very wonderful way of being supportive again and critical of or being able to engage in a conversation and the debates that were going on in the manufacturing of those films. And that was immediately evident as soon as she stepped in the room, apart from being a wonderful human being and great fun to be with. But that's a very difficult thing to do when you're in a junior role, to be able to, to accept having a clear voice, but also to have, obviously to do the job and perform the necessary role of being supported to an editor and a director. But we all got on like a house on fire. She was terrific, and it was quite clear to me that she would just be, we would be caught in the dust as she roared away into the film business and be brushing ourselves down for years later, which is probably the case now. But Terry and I adored her,
From working as an assistant film editor, Vic quickly graduated to lead editor on television programmes like Wonderful You and Hustle. Working for television proved to be quite a different environment.
I knew you'd be okay, kid.
I don't get it.
You're right. Congratulations.
I think the schedules are bonkers in television because most TV I've worked on, they shoot 2 cameras all the time, unlike film, which often doesn't. And I'm not sure anyone on the production side realises that for an editor who watches all the material, watching 2 cameras is a lot longer. Your day goes from being a 10-hour day to a 13, 14-hour day by necessity, I think, if you're actually going to properly do your job. And then the fine cutting process, I think when I first started cutting television, the director and I would have about 3 weeks side by side, and then the producers and execs would have about a week for their screenings. So it'd be about 4 weeks post per episode. And now I get about 4 days with the director, and then the execs have about 3.5 weeks of endless screenings and notes. It's completely changed in terms of, I suppose, the power balance, and you don't really have very long to actually work with the director on the fine cut. So your assembly has to be pretty bang on, I think. When you're cutting television that has adverts, you have to accommodate the advert break. So, and certain networks have rules, like your first advert break can't be earlier than 6.5 minutes or 8 minutes or something. And your last one can't be longer than X minutes or shorter than X minutes. So there are certain rules. But of course, the way they're written, the episodes, is you try and end on a bit of a cliffhanger for each part break. And it can be quite tricky. You sometimes have to fashion a completely different part break than the one written, because it turned out that you've taken a chunk of scenes out in the early parts, and you're now in danger of being too short for your first advert break, or too long. Or I think on Luther episode 1 or 2, we were 8 minutes short, and so we had to go and shoot some extra material.
Sorry to interrupt this creative exploration, but is anyone else interested in how much editors get paid? I know I am.
So in films, you tend to get paid according to either the budget of the film or where you're at in your career. But really the budget of the film drives that. So the film I'm about to start next week, I will be on sort of 50% of the wage that I was on the last film, because it's a £2 million film rather than an 18 million film. Television, I think there's less variables. So on a feature, some editors are probably on 15,000 a week, I should think, in Hollywood, working on a Wonder Woman or whatever. In television, I get the impression that even if you're doing the biggest budget Netflix show, there's a ceiling in television, which I think at the moment is around £2,000. But if you're the lead editor on a big flagship Amazon or Netflix show, you might inch up above that by a little bit, but nowhere near the territory of American film budgets.
In 2006, Vic worked on the adaptation of Jean Rhys's Wide Sargasso Sea, the prequel to Jane Eyre, for the BBC. The following is a fabulous example of how a montage can be so effective in helping to tell the story. Here, Rochester's growing infatuation with his future wife and his new home. It's not so much a case of displaced sound as displaced everything.
She says England is like a dream.
I have to say, at the moment, that's precisely how your island seems to me. Unreal. Like a dream.
How can these rivers and mountains and seas be unreal?
How can millions of people and thousands of buildings and streets seem like a dream?
Oh, easily. Much more easily. In fact, I imagine a big city must be like a dream.
More than your small island.
Do you still think you're dreaming, Mr. Rochester?
I'm not sure, Miss Cosway.
Or perhaps you're not quite over your fever yet.
Perhaps you're not quite ready to wait.
And in this scene, where Rochester realises he's been drugged, look at the breathtaking use of rhythm. Vic continued to work in both film and television on such projects as Hustle and Kidulthood. In 2009, she cut Peter Boker's searing Iraq War miniseries Occupation for the BBC, directed by Nick Murphy. It won the BAFTA for Best Drama Series, and she was nominated for her editing. Here, her tight, close cutting exaggerates the tension felt by the platoon before they embark on a dangerous mission.
Enemy suppressed. Stand by to dismount and left. Target flat is 1 block along. Stand by. Okay, clear to go. Dismount left.
But he's really interesting, that director, because he sets up a lot of shots to look very grabbed and natural. So like the drive-bys, they're incredibly set up, but he just does it in such a way that it kind of cuts together quite easily, because it all feels very grabbed and naturalistic. So it feels like, I think his background is a documentary editing, probably documentary directing, but that's why some of that stuff has a very naturalistic feel to it. So one of the things that Nick does, which I thought was brilliant on Occupation, he'll start a scene. You know how most people shoot a scene where it starts perfectly with, you know, the close up of the water cooler, or it's sort of quite perfect. He'll start the scene with somebody is picking up a piece of paper dropped on the floor. So there's something slightly messy, which just very subtly informs you of it feeling a little bit real.
Last night.
Oh, I didn't think they were real, Lucy.
It was looking in my window.
I think you were dreaming, baby doll.
Sorry about this, Steve.
Lucy, stop scaring yourself.
In 2013, Vic edited a powerful drama series for Channel 4, Southcliffe, which explores a mass shooting in a small English town, how it affects the inhabitants and the journalists covering the story. Again, it was BAFTA nominated, and Sean Harris and Rory Kinnear both won acting awards. It's a very different way of working to anything that had gone before. Whilst much of the structure of the film was in the screenplay, Vic and her director didn't always follow the script. The opening as written didn't work for them, so they decided to start it like this.
We now start on gunshots in the landscape, so that we just added all of that in to try and seed the ending. We sort of threw the shooting into the beginning in order to, I suppose, grab the audience in a different way.
I'm worried about a few things.
Ask me.
I worry I won't produce any eggs. I worry someone's going to drop the petri dish with the embryos and it's all a waste. I worry that I might kill someone. Probably my husband.
I think IVF mixes a crime with passion.
That's good.
This is our second try. Our chances are halved, aren't they?
Statistics are tricky. You know best how you feel.
But I don't.
Yes, I guess it was a great joy working with Sean, because his approach is quite singular, and it has a formality to it, although it probably doesn't seem like it when you watch. But there's a formality to his work. He will try and find the one shot that works. So we could have easily kept the fertility clinic scene just on them. But I guess we must have decided that it was good to see the doctor at some point, or perhaps we cut something out of them. But it would be very like Sean to intend just to stay on them. You don't need anything else. I guess sometimes if I'm cutting a dialogue scene, the way I make the cuts, or the placement of the cuts, and how much you see someone speak and how much you see someone listen is probably driven by the content of the scene, by the nature of the scene.
Stephen.
Commander.
Yeah, they use it as a joke. They think it's funny. But they don't know, do they?
Yeah, Afghanistan, you said.
Special ops.
No way. The regiment?
You know, I was a lot fitter back then.
I bet you got some stories.
Sometimes we'll choose to be more on the listener than the talker, if that's the person we want to identify with in the scene. Occasionally, I suppose you might choose to never be on the person speaking in order to see what the effect is. Again, if it's come from the scene itself, that it's effective to not quite be on the person as they're speaking, but to always be on the recipient, then we might try that as an experiment. Sometimes it's for a less glamorous reason, and it's because you're recording ADR, which is replacing dialogue lines or writing in new lines, usually, to explain things to the audience that they didn't quite get. So quite often, if you see a scene that seems oddly cut and you're never quite on anyone while they're saying anything, it's probably because you're cutting to someone reacting while the person out of camera is given a load of new lines to perform. I think performance is key, probably, to being an editor. But I think performance is also really personal. I can sit with a director that I really, really, really rate, and we generally agree on most things, but we can look at two different takes in a scene and really disagree.
When my dad died, I didn't understand. It's just gone.
They never teach you that, do they?
Or the absence. They can't. It's just kids, mate. It's what kids do.
When I'm assembling, I spend a lot of time just analysing performances.
But hang on, what exactly is an assembly edit? Over to our resident editing expert, Professor Mick Audsley.
I think the term of an assembly of a film, which is done during shooting, usually by the editor in the solitary confinement of their cutting room while the director's shooting, I think that term is misleading because it sounds like it's an uncommitted piece of editorial work that's loose and by its nature it has to include everything that's being shot. But believe you me, an assembly by all of my friends and colleagues in the editorial business is a piece of work which is very, very, very considered, is not rough in any way. It just brings with it the understanding and the use of the material, all of the material that are available to them at the moment, that they are obligated to show to the director because it's been shot and paid for and is part of the screenplay. It is the starting point of the development of the editorial process. I prefer to call it a first cut.
Thank you.
When I'm assembling, I spend a lot of time just analysing performances and laboriously watching every line of every take I watch to try and work out what I think works best for the scene and what I imagine the director's intention is for the scene as well. I work in a really labour-intensive way. As I say, I have no idea how other editors work, but the way I assemble is I try and explore almost all avenues, I mean, within reason. So I quite often assemble a scene with 2 or 3 different beginnings and maybe a couple of middle sections. If it's a long scene, I'll also have a couple of alternates. And then the end might have an alternate. And part of it is because I don't really know what the scene before it's going to be, and I don't really know what the scene after it's going to be. And some of it is just me just finding the piece. And I do it less and less as the shoot progresses, but certainly the first 3 or 4 weeks, so 3 weeks I probably did a lot. And I then let it marinate. So I leave that bin with all the versions marinating. And also music. There may be 4 or 5 different music options, some which I may have actually fitted properly and some which I just sort of slapped on underneath in order to listen to fresh. And then I sit and watch the versions, and then I tend to make a hybrid. So I will take version 2 of the beginning and put it onto the bulk of that. And so I then do another recut, which is why it's so labour intensive. Once I've been through the whole process of exploring options, watching it back days later when I'm fresh to it, and then honing it again, then I feel I'm happy enough with it. I mean, there are always risks. There are always times where you think, oh God, I know the director is expecting to see it completely the other way. And that's why I'll tend to always opt for the riskier version. Unless I know the material really well, unless I've explored a lot of paths, I can't justify why I've done anything. So I like to be able to say to a director, yes, this is why I did it like this. I tried it the way you're talking, and I can show it to you now. But for this reason, I stuck to option 1. And I just find the fine cutting process goes much smoother and much faster for me if I explore quite a few avenues when I'm assembling. I will work really hard during the shoot, and then on a film, I'd like to have a week or 10 days after the shoot, because often a shoot finishes on Saturday night, and we don't get the rushes till Monday or Tuesday from the Friday and Saturday. So you've kind of lost half of the first week that's supposedly fine cutting already assembling, and then I have the great joy of slotting the last pieces together. So I'm more likely to have a section of scene 1 to 12, and then a separate section. And then it's my treat. My treat at the end of assembling is to take off the sort of assembly hat, which can sometimes feel a little like you're on a factory conveyor belt, because the rush is just coming every single day and you have to achieve your day not to get behind. But when that's over, then it's a great joy to join the last sections together. I ideally like to have a director leave me alone for at least a week at the end of the shoot, if not 10 days. But of course, often that doesn't happen. And in television, it's usually written in the schedule as the shoot finishes Saturday night and fine cutting starts Monday morning, which I think is really tough.
I personally tend to know when a film is finished. I don't know how other editors work, but there comes a point where you think, the experience I can describe is that when you see it, you don't want to interfere with it in any way. There's nothing you want to interfere. It seems to be living in its own way. And that's the moment to me when it's finished. Whether that is corroborated by your employers and colleagues is often a difficult one. And I have regrettably seen a film reach that point and then digress from it, in my opinion, slightly. That's difficult. But when is a film finished? Well, often it's when they kick you out of the cutting room and they stop paying your check.
Cutting Second Best Exotic was fabulous and opened other doors for me. It pushed me from a, £2 million budget or £5 million budget up to the sort of 15-20 million budget.
She'd read the script. I sent her the script beforehand and asked her to sort of break it down. What did she make of it and so forth? And, she's very insightful about material generally, and she thinks structurally. She came out to India with us and was part of the shoot. I tend not to really like to see material that is being cut while I'm shooting, unless I really have to in order to illustrate something. That's possibly a lack on my part. I like to stay in the mode of looking forward rather than looking back while I'm making a film. And that's why a sense of trust with the editor is kind of critical, because if I feel I can rely on that, and it was a new relationship at that point, but I absolutely felt I could. And I wanted to know what she thought of the dailies all the time. We talked about the dailies all the time. And I would get her kind of download on it, and she'd talk about how she came into a scene, and I would find that fascinating. I just don't want to see the results of it until I finished the film, which she totally understood.
Yes, when I first got the opportunity to work with John Madden, I jumped at it. And I was a little bit terrified because obviously he's a really experienced, well-regarded director. But I'd also heard from people that I would need to step up my game a bit and that I would need to be top of my game to work with John. I heard from a couple of people that John is so on it, so sharp and so high energy that he likes to surround himself by people he obviously trusts and respects, but also who give him their all. So I was a little bit scared working on Second Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. And I'm delighted that it went so well. And I showed John, and not only John, I showed John, his wife, the script supervisor, the writer and the producer, my first assembly. We all watched it projected in the theatre, which was obviously terrifying for me. And we then went out to lunch afterwards, and someone tugged me on the shoulder and said, that went really well. John's really happy. He's really smiling. And I was so relieved. And then we worked together for the next few months. He's wonderful to collaborate with. The way John shoots is so fluid. He choreographs the actors almost as if choreographing a dance routine on stage. The way he blocks, the way the camera moves so effortlessly. He makes it quite easy to cut in the sense that everything looks quite sexy and fluid and rhythmic. It's very easy to get into the rhythms. But he's also wonderful to work with because there are times when John and I are really crafting the performance, the dialogue, the story beats, and really pulling the film apart, a section of the film apart, where ideas are collapsing into themselves in order to kind of give forward motion. Because he has a very quick brain, his style, he loves to push the story forward. So the audience are kept on their toes with voiceover, sort of pushing you into the next scene while you're watching that, while you're going back to that. And everything has this very fluid, sort of rhythmic style. But then there are other areas where John will happily say, do your stuff on this. I'm going to walk away while you craft that montage, and I know you'll do a great job, and I'm just, let me know when you're happy with a version of it, and I'll take a look at it. Or if I say to him, listen, I've got 2 or 3 versions of something weird I'm trying, with the timeline thrown forward and backwards. I've never, ever heard John say, no, I'm closed to that idea. I'm happy with what we've got, don't show me. It's wonderful that I think I have gained his trust enough that if I think I'm onto something, John will watch it with an absolute open mind.
That was an entirely positive and sort of thrilling experience with her, because it was a very astute assembly. Actually, you make the film 3 different times, don't you? You make the film with the writer. I'm very involved in the writing of the film. And the second person that becomes crucial in that is the cinematographer, obviously, which is that, we need to shape and visualize and reveal the film in a visual sense together. So that's a crucial relationship. And then overlapping with that, obviously, is the third one, which is the editor, because that's, as we all know, where you really make the film. Where you've got all the building blocks, the writing, the performance, the mise en scène, the visualization.
What is this mise en scène John's talking about? I know. Let's ask Professor Mick.
In sort of modern day terminology, I think for movies, it's really down to the blocking of the actors, where the actors move, and how they interrelate physically, and that the director realizes the scene in that way. And it obviously affects the editorial process, because the way the movements of the actors work designates the cover for the material being supplied. So mise en scène is a very important part of the creation of the scenes.
That's that process. The last one I've described is the one that you really need an incredibly close collaboration with somebody in order to be able to intuit your way to that. She has a fantastically good sense of rhythm, and rhythm is everything in editing. It's really what it's about. It's about the rhythm of narrative and revelation and restraint, and what's held back, and what's, when the film wants to motor, and so on and so forth. I kind of think rhythmically at writing stage as well, and at shooting stage. So whether the camera is moving, or when the camera stops moving, or when it doesn't move at all, are very key decisions which I would make up front and discuss with her. She is very, very clever with music. Once she's assembled, she starts to trawl for music that feels as if it might be able to perform a particular function. So, I can't speak highly enough of her, as I'm sure you've gathered along the way. She's very, very gifted, and puts all of her, the range of skills she has, which have to do with intelligence, and have to do with persistence, and have to do with tenacity, and have to do with discipline, and and the motor skills involved in actually frame fucking, as Stephen Frears, I think, used to call it, which really what it comes down to. You're dealing with splinters of time and so forth. All of those things an editor needs to possess, but actually to balance them in the right way so that they don't get in the way of a process is something else. Editing is by far the most enjoyable and relaxing part for a director, no question, because you don't have to make any decisions anymore. You just have to choose what's best out of what you've got. And it's in the nature of a director's need to believe in what they're doing that you do, of course, the thing that you felt like throwing yourself off a cliff at first seeing becomes the most marvellous thing in the world within the space of an edit, because you return to that place of sort of benighted optimism, which you remain in until the point when the film, is unveiled to the rest of the world, at which point you might think, I should have thrown myself off that cliff.
John, I don't think you need to worry about jumping off a cliff.
It is my opinion that the state of slavery is so odious a position that nothing may support it.
In 2013, Vic was brought in to recut Ama Asante's period drama Belle, about which she had this to say.
It's shameful to say, probably. In some ways, I love recutting because it's genuinely the only 4 weeks or 3 weeks that you're allowed to just do what you think's best for a film.
Here, Vic discusses her relationship with music on a film.
I'm quite demanding. I have no idea how any other editor works, but I'm probably quite demanding during the shoot in terms of as soon as we start in the cutting room, I need to listen to a lot of soundtracks because I work with music a lot. I'm very keen to assemble scenes with the music at the time. You never have time afterwards, after assembling, to go back and look for music. I like to have the music there. So I require an assistant to sometimes listen to tons of soundtracks for me if I haven't got time to download all of a certain composer's music. Sound effects, I like them to go through the script. Operation Mincemeat is set in the Second World War. So we have a few sequences on a submarine out at sea with wind and rain. Some of those kind of sound effects, when I'm reasonably happy with the scene, I'll throw them over to Rob, who's my current assistant, who's amazing. And he just goes to town and does such a great job that half the time, everyone watching the film, our version of the film, the fine cut, says, well, obviously we'll improve the sound. Yeah, obviously we'll mix it and it'll sound better. And then we get into the theatre and invariably the director says, I really miss the particular sound that particular sonar device that we had underwater. Can we have Rob's one? And so everyone's scrabbling around and we end up using so much from the cutting copy because actually you've spent by then 10 months hearing particular sounds and realise that, Rob is brilliant. He really chooses these sounds well in many cases. So, and it's quite gratifying that in a way, because for me, you don't want your entire soundtrack to be stripped out because the music's stripped out. And then you have to get your head around the film feeling very different with the composer's music from your temp music. But it can be quite gratifying when many of the sound effects stay.
In 2015, Vic cut the 5-episode miniseries London Spy for the BBC. An unusual production, as she ended up with writer Tom Rob Smith sat alongside her in the edit suite, rather than the director. A stylish thriller with a first-class cast. It involves an ordinary man striking up a relationship with an MI6 operative.
I don't know any code. I don't. So, I don't know. Maybe whatever those secrets are, maybe they weren't meant for me.
Watch how brilliantly Vic handles the editing of director Jacob Verbruggen's circling cameras.
In her will, the bitch leaves just 3 things to me. Just 3 paintings, that's all. And Alex listening, like a puppy dog. And I tell him, heartbroken, they are the 3 paintings I painted for her. I'm an artist, they say. No, not yet an artist. Aspiring to be.
Pretending to be.
That's a true story. I am an artist. What? What do you think? I grew up wanting to be an escort. Enough, Danny. Enough with not believing. What you need? I'll give it to you. You need those little details. Birthmark on the inside of his thigh. Something whispered. Something moaned. He had a thirst, I can tell you that. Like a man crawling out of the desert. Yeah.
It's also representative of Vic's response to the cutting of a certain type of scene.
I really like cutting sex scenes. But when you watch London Spy, the sex scene in London Spy, which is probably episode 1, I imagine, I cut that scene. That probably hasn't changed almost a frame since I assembled it. Is you just go with your instincts?
It's the first night of his new play, Silly.
Well, for all you cricket enthusiasts here in the audience, I'm sorry to report that rain has stopped play at the Oval. Here in the West End, though, of course, nothing stops the play.
More recently, Vic worked with director Simon Curtis on a film about Christopher Robin, though its undercurrent was the post-traumatic stress that author A.A. Milne had experienced since the First World War, and his relationship with his son, who he both neglects and exploits, leaving his care in the hands of a sympathetic nanny.
It's important to someone, that someone cares about him.
Yes, I gave birth to him. He nearly killed me.
With respect, ma'am, a cow can give birth. I think you know all this, sir, but you let it go. And that's not right. A father should stand up for his son.
That's quite enough.
I think I've seen you catch his eye and turn away. You can't turn away anymore.
This montage artfully shows how in the days following his discharge, Milne begins to bond with the boy. It demonstrates a fabulous disregard for continuity.
It's sublime, and their hearts proudly beat to a tune that is older.
I remember badgering Simon about recutting the montage over and over. I kept wanting to incorporate elements that weren't supposed to be in it, and I think I broke him down in the end and got my own way.
So all the world will say, there's a man, and he...
Let's be hunters in the snow.
Excellent notion.
As scripted, it was a sort of visual effects shot. It was sort of one of those moments where Winnie the Pooh looks like he's dancing, sort of animated with this golden sort of halo. And then I think they decided not to do it in a visual effects way, but just to slow-mo the boy.
Does he need a hat? Certainly not. Winnie the Pooh is a creature of bedtime. He's either just got up or just going off. He's reverie in bear form.
Even my closest friends who, they probably think I talk about my job, but actually I never really do. They always say, what are you on at the moment? How's it going? But as you've discovered, if you're actually talking about your job, you can talk for quite a long time. But none of them really know. Ordinary people, I think that they think that you chop the beginning and the end off, and then the director tells you where to put it. I would love to sit a producer down and say, so this is what I started with. No music, no sound effects, and a couple of not great shots. And this is what I've created. But that's why I think the role of editing is so undervalued. Everyone can see cinematography and music and hear the music and go, oh, what a creative genius. And I just think we are so undervalued in terms of what we have to pull out of the bag.
So what have we learned about Vic? She's hugely intelligent and energetic, very proactive and collaborative. She's dynamic, has terrific emotional depth and a great sense of humour, gets involved as early as the script stage, works laboriously on the assembly and gives comments on coverage. She pays a lot of attention to temporary music and sound effects, doesn't mind editing a sex scene, thinks performance is key, absolutely loves displacing sound, is very creative and funny. Apparently she has a great I'm bored face, Working with directors is like dating, thinks editing is underrated, and even her friends don't know what she does. They think she chops the beginning and the end off, and the directors tell her where to put them. Hopefully this film we've made will show you it's way more complicated than that, and indeed a very difficult job where you need some serious skills.
I personally tend to know when a film is finished.